I loved advertising. It gave you an incredible, rich smorgasbord of different clients and cultures, and we worked with everyone from Coca-Cola to Pepsi-Cola to Kodak to Disney to, Procter & Gamble, Unilever, FedEx, BMW, you name it. It was a ride. It was a great ride.
All right. Hello, guys. Today we have Peter Wilken, a LinkedIn connection and strategist/author.
Yep. I'm a brand strategist. Yep. Ex-ad man.
How are you, Peter?
Good. Thank you. Good. Great to be here. Thanks for having me on board.
Of course. Yeah. Firstly, can you maybe tell us more about the full journey that has taken you here?
To get to where I am now, which, sure, I'll try and do that in a kind of really condensed way. I left university in the UK. I was in Edinburgh, not really knowing what I wanted to do. Went into and discovered a small little ad agency in Edinburgh called Halls. And it just instinctively felt right, something I could do, something that really appealed to my kind of creative and combined business sense. Up until then, I'd been really struggling to find something that I thought I could really do well. And that inspired me. Once you'll find, if you're talking here and your SFU group and your younger group, you're looking at kind of establishing careers and things now, it's so much easier if you know what you're looking for. You're motivated and you're passionate. So I knew I then wanted to get into advertising, and that was the beginning of a tough journey. If you looked, the big ad agencies were all UK, London-based or New York-based, and to get in, you needed a first-class degree from Oxford or Cambridge, which I was not going to get. So I invested in a postgraduate diploma course, which was tough. All my friends were starting to work and earn money, and I was still going back to school. And it was basically a year learning how to write a CV. I was super fortunate to get into one of the big top 20 agencies in London, McCann's, and that's a whole nother story. I can tell you about that if you're interested, and kind of work my way up from there. From young exec to director to ending up running offices for 𝐎𝐓𝐇𝐄 in the Philippines, moving out to Singapore after London, and then being hired to run Leo Burnett's Southeast Asia out of Malaysia, and finally running BBDO Asia Pacific out of Hong Kong and looking after their 14 markets. And that was a wonderful ride, if you like. I loved advertising. It gave you an incredible, rich smorgasbord of different clients and cultures, and we worked with everyone from Coca-Cola to Pepsi-Cola to Kodak to Visa to Disney to Procter & Gamble, Unilever, FedEx, BMW, you name it. It was a ride. It was a great ride. But at the age of 40 or whatever it was, some friends would still kind of tease you and say, advertising, when you're going to get a real job. And I always wanted to set up and run my own company, and I did so with a couple of partners. When I was 40, we set up what has transpired with hindsight 20 odd years later to be one of the first pioneering specialist brand consultancies, and that was called the Brand Company. And what we had identified, my colleagues and I, at that time was that millions and millions of dollars were being spent on what we called the superficial packaging of brands. That is your logos, your visual identity, and to a lesser extent, your advertising campaigns, things that you could touch, but not the substance of the experience of what your products or services deliver, which is ultimately what drives perceptions of your brand. And so we developed what was essentially a change management company from a brand perspective. And we developed a process called brand-centered management, which the heart of which was your brand DNA, defining who you are, what you stand for, to whom and why, and how you go about delivering it. And this is like years before Simon Sinek was doing his why, which he's done brilliantly. That was the first part of our question. Your role, why do you exist beyond making money to serve your customers? Then how do you go about it? What's your promise? And that was phenomenally successful. As the head of what was then the number one creative agency in the world, BBDO, I would struggle to get in to see CEOs of the top companies. They would say, go talk to our marketing people. This is brand, that's communication. Yeah, talk to our people down there. And typically, the marketing people weren't even sitting around the boardroom table. But having given up all that kind of corporate splendor and the Gordon Gekko power office and the Porsche, and given the keys to the Porsche back, and started, as busman into our tiny little dark basement office with three of us there and an assistant. That was it with our startup, the brand company. I could get in to see the CEO of the most powerful, largest real estate company in the world at the time, Sun & Kai Properties, and AIGs, and the Shangri-La Hotel. We ended up working with the Hong Kong Tourist Authority, Swire Group, Cathay Pacific, because the story and the way in which we were positioning ourselves and what we were doing for them, change management through the brand perspective, really resonated and worked. So that's what we ended up being acquired by a London-based group, which should have been a happy ending, wasn't. And again, that's a whole nother story. We moved here to Vancouver 18 years ago now, 2007. And I continued practicing what we were doing at the brand company under my own company's name called Dolphin. And again, there's a story behind that name. And touchwood, that's been phenomenally successful for me, continuing on that practice, working with companies, organizations, large and small, across all categories. So everyone from kind of UBC to the city of Surrey, to charitable operations, to structural engineering firms, to online YouTube companies selling men's hair care products, you name it. The philosophy works. And so I continue to do that. But as I get older, and you can see I've got silver hair. I've earned it. Actually, I was grey from my mid-30s, so I've got very used to it. But as you can see, I've got some kind of mileage on the odometer, some experience. And whilst I love doing the consulting work, the Eat What You Kill model is quite exhausting. I have been encouraged by the clients I've done work with to spread the word and to scale it. And so I spend half my time working with 2 or 3 really good fit consulting clients on a long-term basis. And the rest of the time I do either speaking engagements or mostly now promoting my online brand strategy program through the Lighthouse Brand Strategy Academy. And I have a small community in here, the Lighthouse Brand Builders Community and Circle as well. And my mission there is to democratize effective brand strategy. That is to make it much more affordable, more accessible, and above all, practical, actionable for small business owners, solopreneurs, and aspiring brand strategists who want to level up their strategy game. So that was a very, very long answer to your question, wasn't it? But no, that's where I'm at.
It's quite comprehensive, and there's a lot to kind of dive into this whole story. But I have a couple questions that we'll touch on. And the first one comes to, you got acquired and you said it should have been a happy ending, but it wasn't. So can you speak on the acquiring journey and maybe your potential mistakes or what have you learned from that?
Okay, yeah, definitely. And I know because your angle, you've got several young entrepreneurs. You're very entrepreneurial yourself. And you always jump to the conclusion that the dream is to build a company that you sell and you'll be acquired and you can cash out in and then go and retire. And some people are fortunate enough to do that. And that was kind of our model, and it should have worked. The mistake we made, honestly, was selling out too early without having built it into the scale and capacity of what it could and should be. Seeing now what some of the other big brand companies have done, we were the kernel of that and at the heart of that. Hindsight's a wonderful thing. There were several reasons, both personal and professional, why it was the right time to sell. And frankly, we were a little bit unlucky in the way in which things panned out. There was a confluence of circumstances you would never have guessed. That the London-based group, one of the key founders had a heart attack that nearly killed him and took him out of the game. They would stretch themselves whilst they were acquiring us. They'd acquired a New York-based company. They'd taken their eye off the ball of their customers. They lost a key client. Another key player became father at the age of 53 and reoriented his priorities, and the whole kind of thing. Suddenly, what was really solid wasn't so much. And so anyway, we ended up buying back all our rights, although I had the rights to use what we'd done anyway with our processes, and that was probably the best thing. The learning there is it's not necessarily the dream or the cash out at the end. It's what your learning curve is, and that kind of spun me into work that I've done now. I don't have any regrets being where I'm at now, although yeah, sure, would it be nice to have more feathers in the nest? Absolutely.
You also mentioned your sort of, I guess, golden era where you really liked working for that agency that you mentioned previously, overseas.
Yeah.
What makes them stand out, and what kind of culture, what your environment affects on you loving the job you do?
Loving what you do makes all the difference if you can find it. I mean, it is hard to find, and most people who tell you that they kind of love every minute of what they do every day are probably not telling the truth, because all of us have some kind of what I would call shit shoveling to do, and admin and work and stuff that we don't enjoy. But you should be spending 60% of your time really following things that energize you and that are really passionate, at least. The agency that you're referring to, again, that was probably our time in the small agency at 𝐿𝐀𝐄𝐇 in the Philippines, where there was, the only way was up. And I was super fortunate to have a fantastic team around me, partly built but by me, partly inherited. But, again, sometimes it takes the perspective or the distance of time to look back to realize just how good the times were, because we were working so hard, but we were having a ball. This was a small agency of 𝐿𝐀𝐄𝐇's fantastic network and great creative credentials as well. But they have offices of different size and scale around the world. And in the Philippines, it was way behind what the average would be. An 𝐿𝐀𝐄𝐇 office would normally be 1, 2, or 3 in its market and really powering in. In the Philippines, we were like kind of nowhere. It was 40 people strong, 75% revenue with one client, very, very vulnerable. Previous owners of questionable reputation, let's put it this way. They were kind of pulled aside on drug trafficking charges and things like this. There was a lot of baggage, and the only way was up in this company, which was probably why I was allowed to run it, because it wouldn't have been the end of the world if things hadn't worked out. But fortunately they did. And the upside of that was we had no boundaries or rules. We could define really what we wanted to do. And I had a fantastic young creative director partner called David Guerrero, who's now big famous name in the Philippines, BBDO Guerrero. And he and I and the leadership team came around and said, look, we are unequivocally going to be the creative leaders in this market. It's the only thing that's really going to stand us apart. And the Philippines has tons of creative talent. I mean, if you look at the musical and the singing talent, and it's an amazing market for creativity, but not necessarily, at least then, originality. Great at copying, not so much at original, or not pushing the original things. And anyway, we got slated as the kind of young semi-expats, greenhorns coming in here, all the accusations of arrogance and trying to change cultures and impose values that weren't real and blah, 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 blah. And we said, stuff it. We don't care. We just do not care. We're going to show you what great work looks like. And within 3 years, we had won more international awards than all the other agencies combined in the market. In fact, they'd never won an international award before we won one. And then they suddenly realized, actually, they can do this. Within our own network, 𝐿𝐀𝐄𝐇, we were the second or third most awarded network, and that's including New York, London, Brazil, all of these huge creative centers, with some really, really piercing and cut-through work. I have to say, we got picked up by people like Chris Tarrant in the UK on their TV shows, and they were featuring our work because it was so out there and radical. And we made an absolutely uncompromising stance that we put work first. And that work, by the way, was it drove business. It wasn't just awareness. It wasn't just irrelevant shock work. It carried a message, and it carried relevance for our clients, I should say. And so we got noticed. And Sir Martin Sorrell, I don't know whether you've heard of him, but he was the most famous kind of head of WPP. Identified us as one of his strategic foxholes, and we would come out, and basically he would use us as a test market for different structures and systems to break the rules within a kind of rigid, quite staid agency structure at that point. The agency was 80 years old at that point, so 70, 80 years old. So we were doing things very differently. Again, a long answer to your question, but yeah, you ask anybody about that, it was a true golden era. It changed the nature of the advertising industry in that country. And it certainly got us recognized and moved on, not without, ruffling a few feathers.
It's interesting how your like golden era is work first and kind of climbing the ladders, which I guess brings that true essence of joy and happiness when you're hitting new thresholds, and it just brings you fulfillment in a sense.
Yeah, and it was wonderful to experience that with a group of people. We have a strong bonded team that still to this day are in touch with each other. And even though they've been dispersed and gone off and done things brilliantly, either independently or with other agencies, that era, you'll find people come back and say the same thing, said that was the golden times. And sometimes when you're on the train, you're riding the train and you're trying to juggle things, and you don't realize that journey or that phase of your career is golden. You don't feel it, you're working it. Sometimes you do. But yeah, that would be my message as well. You've heard it before. It's not necessarily the destination getting there, it's the journey and then who you share it with. And sometimes the joy is in the reflection back on it.
Exactly. You kept mentioning different hubs in the world, like New York, London, as the creative hubs of the world. What do they have different between each other, and why do they truly stand out from other parts?
Okay, well, that's an interesting question. Again, I mean, it's fluid. There are places that are kind of, well, in that industry, in the ad industry, that have got more natural kind of or higher levels of creative production. It's just factual. You'll go and see where they're centered, and New York and London would be that. But Brazil, Rio has always been up there. Bangkok in Thailand in Asia was a creative hotspot, always reliable, consistent. And there would always be 2 or 3 emerging ones that would come out from strange places. Vietnam, Taiwan, or Korea would suddenly come up with some amazing stuff, often driven by 1 or 2 individuals. Singapore was quite hot. KL had a great streak. So you can't quite tell, but you can recognize it. And it comes from being able to nurture an environment that nurtures creativity, so that is open-minded, has fertile soil, knows how to recognize great creative ideas when you see them, which is rare. Above all, knows how to, cradle and be able to develop them in a way that gives them a chance to survive. And one of the many things I've written in my books and other things is, great creative ideas have many fathers. People will want to take some ownership of it, and nobody wants to own a bastard, as they say. But those great creative ideas are typically bandwagon. People get onto them after they're clearly successful. The hardest thing is to be able to generate an idea when it's a small idea. Big ideas don't start off as big ideas. They're born as very small ideas. And those small ideas tend to polarize people. You either love it or you hate it. You're either excited by it or you're scared by it. That's how you can tell a great idea. And it takes courage and determination and that right nurturing environment to be able to nurture this small seedling that's easily crushed underfoot or pecked to death, to at least give it a chance to see what it's going to grow into. You don't know. Is it going to be a weed? Is it going to be a cactus? Is it going to be the mighty oak that you hope it's going to be? You've got to give it that chance. These days, so many people are there to peck it to death or crush it before, you can get it. It's hard to get to maturity. And again, coming back to your answer, that is the reason why you get certain creative cultures and centers, because they've learned how to do that and how to protect and how to recognize.
The elephant in the room. How do you effectively strategize for a brand?
Okay, well, that's a huge question. But you basically start by asking the right questions and understanding the context. So first of all, strategy and brands are overused words and they're beaten thin, and not everybody interprets them in the same way. when you say strategy, and often we're called and say, oh, it's strategic planning time. Peter, come in and help us. It's time, 7 years up or 10 years up. We want a strategic review and a new strategic plan. And the image is that you're going to wheelbarrow in this 287-page strategic plan that's going to be a master plan to drive the business forward. And that is not what I see as strategy. Strategy is a journey. And, I liken it to, and I use in my book, an image of a sailboat sailing across an ocean towards a destination over the horizon, which you've articulated, you've created a vision for. If you've done it well, it's inspiring, it's tangible. You know roughly the points on the compass that are going to take you there, but you can't see it yet. It's over the horizon. So you're pushing for that. And strategy is how you set your course to get there in the most efficient and effective way possible. Having the right equipment, the right boat, the right crew, knowing how to trim your sails to adjust to things, and control the world that you can control to get to your destination. That's strategy. Strategy is basically choice. It's what you choose to do and what you choose not to do. But each little decision that you're making as you're steering your boat towards your destination has an impact. Sometimes you have to pull the sails in. There are elements that you cannot control: wind and waves, hurricanes, fog coming down, competition coming there, a huge tanker smashing you in the bows, hitting rocks, uncharted things. There's always that. One thing you can be sure of, you're going to get that in your journey. And so you need to plan for agility to deal with that unpredictable things. So finding that balance between controlling the world you can control and dealing with the world that you can't control, that's beyond your control, is also a key part of strategy. And then you build in the brand component. I mean, the brand, there are so many kind of definitions of it, and all parts of them are right. My definition is that your brand is a territory in the mind, a desired perception, between the ears of what it is that you want to stand for, that drives, affinity, loyalty, advocacy, and everything else. That is it. It's intangible. It's not a real thing you can touch. It can take years to build up, or it can be built in a second, with an instant thing, but it needs to be constantly reinforced. It should fulfill, ultimately, a promise or an expectation of an experience that stands you apart, that's relevant, that's differentiating, and that's credible. That's your brand. So if your brand is this desired perception in the minds of your most valued customers, and you can articulate it in a way in which you can replicate it in that relevant, consistent, compelling, different way, why would you not want to use that formula to drive everything that your business does and says? Primarily starting with the does, the products and services you offer, the systems and processes that enable you to deliver those products and services, how your people think and operate and behave and aligned, and then how you communicate to your target market, how they perceive their experience that should kind of come back again to your brand DNA. Again, a bit of a long question, but that was a long answer. That was a big question. Give me something simpler.
Going into the deep waters, what's your maybe top 3 favorite brands personally?
Oh, gosh, there are so many. And again, that is a really good question. Brands that kind of really fulfill their promises and are consistent and have been doing it for years and years. I love, to be honest, I do love both the Coca-Cola and the Pepsi Colas that I work with. They're great brands. They don't pretend to be more than what they are. I've worked for many years for both of them on opposite sides and very different positionings. Not necessarily such a worthy thing, selling, fizzy sugar cola water to people. And is it something you need? No. But does it bring a bit of joy and fun? Yes. Certainly in the communication side. So they'd be right up there still. They've been apart. There are other brands that really put their money where their mouth is. The big one at the moment would be like Patagonia, I'm sure you're familiar with, really beginning to kind of pioneer the path towards real purpose-driven values. And, you might argue, yes, okay, the founder has already made his billions and he can do what he wants, but it takes courage to basically put ads out that say, don't buy me, which is exactly what they've done. The message was, repair and recycle our stuff. It's good quality before you buy. If you need to buy, great, but repair and recycle first. And their intent to kind of recycle all their profit back into, genuine environmental welfare to combat climate change. They put their money where their mouth is, and I think they've got millions and millions of followers because they do what they say they're doing. So yeah, and then there's everything kind of. Let me throw that question back to you. What's one of your favorite brands
I would probably have to say Rolex is pretty up there. Rolex, Nike, and maybe Ferrari, like those three just kind of stand out to me.
Worked on Rolex, great brands. Way back, did all the alignment with their tie-ups with the golf and the PGA and stuff like that they're related to. And yeah, they have a fantastic product and a positioning in people's minds, which is, this is the gold watch that you get given at the end of retirement. It's got to be a Rolex, and better to be known for that, even if it is kind of aging and something that people don't experience now because people don't stay in jobs for 30 years. They're not. There's challenges for them still to kind of, bring it down to the youth level and things like this. And watches are a fascinating thing, frankly. I'm almost surprised to see you wearing a watch because the younger generation don't wear watches now. They just carry it around on their iPhone or their Android. But it has become, watches are now not there to tell the time. They're to say this is prestigious, and it's almost like ornamentation. It's almost like jewelry now.
I must say though, I do check my watch for time.
Yeah,
you're old school.
You're an efficient doer, and that's great. And it takes all types. I still have I've got my iWatch now. If I was picking a watch brand that I really relate to, they were all. And it's a great example, watches, of how you kind of segment into different attitudes. If you're a sports watch, you probably tag Heuer, and even in sports, you break it out into. So if you're Breitling, you're into the air, old kind of Air Force type thing, and if you're a diver, you're into Oris, and so the real top prestige now, I think, pushing Rolex is Patek Philippe.
Yes.
I think that's actually managed to supersede them. And they've done that by appealing again, as great brands do, to the heart. You don't ever own a Patek Philippe. You just pass it on, or you carry it on for the next generation. So it's just a fantastic proposition and promise, which I love. Created from nothing, but builds a whole brand. So yeah, that led us into a good discussion.
100%, yes. What made you write Dim Sum Strategy and its follow-up book?
Well, yeah, and the follow-up book is a little ebook called The 10 Formats to Build a Strong Brand. Hopefully that should be good. It should be good still. Yeah, Dim Sum Strategy. I think I was telling you, I was doing my consulting to clients and doing the brand-centered management and helping them define their brand DNAs and orient their organizations and drive change through their brand, through defining their brand DNA and then bringing it to life in everything they did and said. And they would come back to me and say, look, Peter, what you did for us was fantastic. It was really great. But, you could do this for hundreds of other people if you scaled it, if you codified your knowledge and your process. And we had talked about doing that at the brand company, but we didn't stay together long enough, really, 5 years, to be able to package it in the way in which we should have done. And so I decided that I would put it down and write it in a book, and I should have done it 10 years before I did. And so that's what Dim Sum Strategy is all about. It tells the story of the brand company, how it was evolved, what brand-centered management is, how to develop your own brand DNA and drive that forward in this 4Ds process, discovery, definition, defining your brand DNA, direction, setting your strategic direction, and delivery, executing against it with third parties. And but I did that in a way which I knew people could digest in simple kind of bite-sized chunks, like a dim sum meal, that you can take the learning and use the strategic thinking tools that we used, like dim sum meals. You can, within 5 or 10 minutes, you can really quickly absorb it and then take learning and go and run with it yourself if you want. So it shared like 40 or 50 of the best strategic thinking and creative models that we use with our clients, that our clients told us that were valuable for them, and spreads it out in this really easy, digestible form. I should have bought you a copy of the book. I'm so sorry.
No
Well, you
worries.
have to get it. It's so yeah, that's been out there, and I'm happy to say, quite highly acclaimed, even though we've never actually spent a marketing dollar on it. We're just about to push it this year, funnily enough, through a publicity thing, because I think I told you beforehand. It was launched through a then New York publisher, literally just before COVID hit. And so our entire kind of book-selling roadshow was pulled. And for various other reasons I told you, we blanketed down for about 6 months. So the whole thing never happened. So, but it's got out there by osmosis, and it's so rewarding when you kind of get this feedback from people saying nice things about the book and how it's helped them shape careers or build brands. That's really, really kind of very rewarding from people who don't have to be nice to you, not just friends or colleagues. I think I've had lovely compliments back. One guy, in fact, 2 in a week, came back with almost the same message. And one said, "Peter, he showed me a picture of his pile of books that he was reading, and he said, 'Your book is top of my pile.' And I said, 'Oh, that's wonderful, thank you.' And he said, How did you do? How did you measure that?" And he said, "You're a 15-tab book." He said, "So you have these little sticky bits of paper." And he said, "Look, having read this, I've got 15 tabs which I keep coming back to for points to illustrate that have driven me or I've implemented in my business." So that's a wonderful kind of compliment. Not everybody will feel that way, but hopefully, So that's been good. 10 Commandments was a kind of a different thing, but also to help generate some awareness for dim sum strategy, because I know the people who've read dim sum strategy really rate it, and they come back, and it holds water, that book. It's solid and helpful. The 10 Commandments came about because on my speaking circuit, I do some voluntary talks to the universities as well, and the students, the marketing students, and they would come up at the end of it after hearing kind of some of the background I'm doing and possibly being more impressed than they should be, saying, "Oh wow, we'd dream of working at that agency or on that brand, and you've done all of this and that and the other, and tell us everything you know. Tell me everything you know." Literally, I had a girl come up and say this to me and look me in the eyes, and I kind of pulled back and I said to her, "Well, but I've got to go to my next class in 10 minutes, as it is." So it was like, and I would kind of laugh, which was a bit rude. But then when I thought about it, I thought, God, I wonder whether I could actually condense the really meaningful learning from 35 years in advertising and brand strategy and brand consulting and change management into 10 minutes. And the humbling truth is that I managed it in 15 minutes. So that's what the 10 Commandments is all about. It's like the 10 things that you must do or learn if you're a brand strategist or a business owner, you cannot do without. And this will make a huge difference. The 10 commandment things that you must do if you want to build a strong brand. And if you want to steer that ship that I was talking about strategically in a productive, efficient way that's going to bring joy and success. So that's what the 10 Commandments are. That is very visual. It's a short book. It's ebook format, very visual, big striking headline, one punchy page for each point, and kind of written for the zillennials who kind of want it quick, instant gratification, but as deep as you can get in a quick time. So yeah, check them out if you can. They're out there.
100%. The links of both will be in the top of the description. So check it out and tell Peter what you think. I'm sure it's very rewarding when How long did it take you? How many hours did it take for the dim sum strategy?
It does take some discipline to do that. And, if anyone is considering writing their own book, everyone does it kind of differently. But I was inspired by a visit to Ernest Hemingway's house. He's one of my idol writers, and brilliant writer down in Key West in the Florida Keys. And he had a very modest little writing desk above his garage, actually overlooking this garden in Key West. And I went up there and I stood behind his desk and then did a bit of research on how he did it. And his approach was write 1,200 words, 800 to 1,200 words every day if you can. Maybe you take a day off of the weekend, but every day 800, 1200 words. And if it's flowing really well and you're spinning past that, stop, don't really force yourself, but try and get at least those 800 words done. And when you've done that, go fishing or go drinking. I mean, he did more drinking than fishing, I think, or combine them both. But, he lived his life and that was it. And that was creative. And before you know it, when you make a habit of it, it builds up. You've got your 40, 50,000 words that you need to have a book. So it's that habit forming. And I would get up very early in the morning, six in the morning, and I would devote an hour or two to writing those 800 or 1200 words. And, sometimes you'd go back and you'd edit them all out, or you wouldn't. The other thing was finding a great editor, and I had a great editor who basically really passed it down into something that was meaty and professional. The book originally was a third again as long, and I'd put lots of anecdotes of what I thought were amusing stories from the advertising world and my experiences then that reinforced, and the brand consulting world that reinforced some client experiences in a fun way. And he stripped them all out, took them all out, what I thought was most interesting. And in hindsight, of course, he was absolutely right. It's a much more professional and well-paced book. But yeah, those fun bits, maybe that's another book in its own right.
Yeah. So now, do you enjoy writing more, or what's kind of next for Peter?
Well, the thing that I really enjoy most is, I have to say, mentoring and coaching aspiring brand strategists and other experienced brand strategists and small business owners and solopreneurs. These are people who are either working on their own, but nobody works on their own now. They've always got virtual support networks around them. Small businesses, I'm talking 1 to 10 people, and more often than not, it's less than 5 people who kind of need support. They're smart people. They're well-read. They're hardworking. They just need some guidance and a strategic sounding board, and sometimes confidence building and pointing a way for them, which is always unique. But giving them the confidence to follow a few, battle-proven systems and processes, which I do through my Lighthouse Brand Strategy Academy. I have an online program called the CBO Masterclass, which is the Chief Brand Officer Masterclass, and that's something I feel passionate about. I talked earlier about the marketing and the branding role being kind of not as high as it should be. Intentionally, the Chief Brand Officer, which is a term which I hope is going to become more and more established, is recognized as the really powerful C-suite role it is. And Chief Brand Officers are often one and the same with CEOs. The best CEOs, the West Coast CEOs in California that are, have been running all the tech industries are CBOs as well as CEOs. They're one and the same person. They understand the value of brand and they center it for their business. But a chief brand officer's role is that it's articulating the unique positioning and value proposition of your brand and seeing that it is championed and driven through everything that the organization does to deliver its promise to its customers. So it's a very, very fundamental and powerful role. And once you've recognized it and you realize you don't have it, there's a real need to do that. So this program basically helps upskill strategists and business owners to, literally handhold them through a process, the brand management process, to qualify them to, genuinely claim that they can operate at a chief brand officer level, at a high strategic level that drives change throughout organizations. And so I find that very, very rewarding. It's relatively new. It's kind of a year in. I've had 53 people go through the program. I've got a little community up there in Circle where we collaborate and share and work, and I'm in the process of expanding that. I don't ever want it to get too big because I think the future is in a much more human, personal, interconnected, private communities like that you are welcomed into and that you relate to the other people in there and, collaborate with each other to be able to help improve your journeys. So, yeah, that's what I found most rewarding. It's in that mentoring and coaching role. I do bi-weekly live cohort sessions and we talk. One of them is always just a Q&A session. How's it going? What's the journey doing? How's it going with your with the modules. I mean, it's very comprehensive. It's like 6 modules and 6 lessons in each module, and 50 short form videos, instructions, and 100 plus templates and worksheets to follow through. So it's very easy to follow and instructive. And the emphasis is really on the practical implementation. So many courses out there are academic, theoretical, and often done by highfalutin professors from behind lecterns, but have never actually really got their hands dirty in the trenches and doing it and working that commercial level at all levels, from highest iconic brands to low unknown startups. And I find that really helps, so that the whole program is driven towards like practical implementation. And seeing that work with my lighthouses is just wonderful. I mean, I've had one super bright lady runs her agency out of California, and basically almost doubled her business in 2 weeks after adopting a different positioning of becoming a chief brand officer, a strategic partner, as opposed to an executional one-off supplier. And has just had her little agency win a top small business award. So fantastic for her. Others who are running businesses large or small, trying to set up a coffee shop chain, for example. Another one who's looking to take on USA Today and launch and bring back regional publications and ownership of local news, which has not been done. Really wonderful, ambitious things, and you can't tell what's next. Another individual who's come out of a senior level at hospitality and still has a huge amount to contribute as a consultant in that area, but doesn't quite know how to pitch himself, has always had backups of a corporate operation, and now is doing it on his own and starting up. So many in between, so that's been really rewarding.
If you could go back to the age of 20, what would you do differently in your journey, and what would you tell your younger self?
Well, I hope my 21-year-old son, who's touring Europe at the moment, isn't going to listen to this one. Well, they're 29, but I would have had much more fun and be wilder. And I was relatively wild. I would have, if there was any time to kind of push boundaries and let go without, responsibilities for family and friends, things like that. That's the age. We talked about golden ages of career-wise. Looking back in times, from 20 to 26 now. I think it used to be a bit younger in my time, but 20 to 26 is like golden time of really find your soul, do what you want. Be responsible, but primarily you can afford to be selfish in inverted commas and pursue your path. Some at that age may already have responsibilities, and that's good for them. I would have invested, if I'd understood what I know now about my own thinking preferences and biases and habits, which I do intimately now because, my background is psychology, and one of the discovery processes I do is a whole thing around whole brain thinking. That would have helped steer me away from some mistakes. And we all make mistakes, and they're fine if you learn from them. But for, taking particular jobs or doing certain things, and I probably would not have done if I had known a little bit more about who I was and how I think and thought. So I would have invested a little bit more time in that
early on. Yeah, you've visited so many countries around the world.
Yeah,
what are your top maybe cultures or countries that you visited and you'd love to go back?
You're going to be really disappointed with my answer because it's so PC. But I've lived in 11 countries. I've been lucky enough and worked in 8 or 9 of them. So I've been super lucky from, everywhere from Jackson, Mississippi to Southampton to Edinburgh to Solomon Islands I lived in for 6 years, and Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, Hong Kong, quite a few places here before Canada. And people often ask me that question, what's your favorite place? And the reality is it's like a fruit bowl of really mixed fruits, and everyone has got a different flavor, and you relish them all in a different way. And honestly, that sounds so cliche, but It's so true. I could go back to any one of those places and I would love it and enjoy it and know where to go back. And I find them so enriching. There's nowhere where I look back and I think, oh my God, I hated that and I didn't get anything out of it and it was horrible and I needed to leave. So I've been so lucky. I've been so lucky in that way. Yeah, do you have favorite moments? Of course there are. There are all of my time in Asia. We had some real challenging times, but all of them were rich and rewarding. And you find you connect across. It filled my soul because you realize there are so many greater similarities between races and beliefs and creeds and cultures than there are differences if you look for them. And again, I don't mean to kind of come across as a kind of world peace kind of guy. And there's it takes tension to kind of move forward. But we have friends of all colors, creeds, nationalities, religions, beliefs. Yeah, and you pick them up as well. My wife is Filipina now. She's is married, so I'm married to Asia. Our family is half Asian, and I've always assessed people by who they are, their values, their beliefs, how they act, not just what they say, way before ethnicity or gender or anything else. So
yeah, I definitely agree. The world seems more divided than ever, and it's unfortunate how it is. I don't know. I hope you all come to peace as well. I know peace and kind of conflicts. There needs to be conflicts for peace, but yeah, I definitely agree with you. Yeah. How do you think the role of AI will change the landscape, brand strategy, and all of that kinds of areas?
Oh goodness, again, it's a really big question, and I can't pretend I've got a right answer to it. It's also a question that's been asked of me many times before. And, AI is the big buzzword thing. Sitting here with my silver hair and my, whatever it is, 30, 35 years advance on you where you are, one of the things that I've learned quite early on was that nothing is ever as bad or as good as it makes out at first, ever. So chill a little bit and take a step back. I do believe that AI, and particularly generative AI, is one of those absolutely transformational events in history, like as significant as the internet and the atomic bomb easily. I think it's underestimated, its power at the moment. If I was doing the scary versus excited scale, I try very hard to be in the middle of that kind of thermostat thing, but I'm tending on more scary, frankly, at the moment. I'm hoping, again, it will be wonderful, but I think it's going to be difficult before it's wonderful. And if you listen to some of the founding fathers of these, large language, kind of network formations, which is what we're currently at in this first phase of AI, they themselves are worried about the beast that they've unleashed. Do I think I'm a glass half full type guy? Do I think it's going to destroy humanity? No. The dystopian vision is of an AI system that will refuse to pull the plug out, as it were, so you can never turn it down. And actually, I think we're there already, which is the speed at which we are transcending humans' ability is far faster than we imagined. And I'm thinking about language and translations and the ability to process data in depth or anything mathematical or logical or left modal brain. AI is already beating us as humans. It's now the human side of what we can do to manage or control with that. And, the utopian vision of that was that it would take away all our mundane tasks. It would free us up from, forgive me, burger flippers out there, I don't mean to be it, but this is a kind of cliche, from the kind of more mundane tasks that drive people crazy could be done by robots or AI, and free us to have more leisure time and more time investing in things like we'd like to do, sail yachts around Cyprus or whatever. That's the utopian side of it. The dystopian side is that actually we concede control to machines, and we're not far off doing that in some areas already. People have not thought about it, but this is not just at the lower level thing. I consult to a group of, orthopedic surgeons. They confess themselves that radiologists are now more efficiently or usurped by AI. AI can read X-rays much more efficiently and arguably sometimes with better bedside manner than radiologists can. Why do radiologists still exist? I mean, they arguably they shouldn't. There are political and humanitarian reasons why they won't. People who've invested their entire careers, 30 years in building up this, have got at least political protection on their roles temporarily, but that's all going to go. Countries like Hungary don't have radiologists anymore. It's gone.
Wow.
You think about high-level expert surgeons who are doing these surgical procedures. 75% of what they're doing can be done by computers now, today. How long is it going to take before it's 100% or 95%? Enough to be able to, and it's all here. Lawyers, whose principal role is kind of resource and information and data processing and things like this. It's, of course, there's a human element to all of that. But in terms of the data sourcing and records and things like this, all of those memory banks and searches are much better served by AI than they are with humans. And you might argue, well, it's good. It's a level. It's an equalizer. And we're going to go through this dramatic era of change and revision of what really is valued. And I think we will go through that. I think we'll go through a transparency of what value and reward is for roles that people play. And I think that's a good thing. We can see some more humanitarian work and things that make really difference in people's lives and social lives in a positive way being rewarded more than they are. So, big answer to your question. And on the brand strategy side and the graphic design side, you can see there's a race to the bottom already. Funnily enough, I had this conversation with a client yesterday lunch. The conclusion was some things will change a lot and some things won't. If you imagine that half of the people out there wouldn't value great creative work or wouldn't recognize a creative idea if it bit them in the bum, and can get things super cheap now. And when they were complaining that they were paying a graphic designer $3,000 or $4,000 to do a design for them, and then complaining that actually, 99 designs were raising their prices from $350 to $500, and they could get it for $200 or less on Fiverr. Now they can get it for free, nothing. So for them, this works perfectly. They can tick the box, and good luck to them. I mean, a couple of them are going to luck out, but for those who really can still recognize that there is quality in the human element of thought and decision making and rationale, and not just briefing but executing great design, not just adequate design, the world won't change so much. With AI can still be that helper or that tool. But all of that said, I think it's a little convenient for people to say AI is my magic helper. It's not going to change much. Wake up, guys. It really has the power to completely transform if the shackles will let go.
Do you think in the near future there will be a basic human income that everyone would be entitled to, because most of the jobs could be taken by AI/robots in the next 5 to 10 years? What do you think about that idea?
It's a really interesting idea, and I don't know how the financial models work out, but somebody's obviously done the modeling and said it would probably be a more efficient way to do that. People would still use it differently. Some would maximize it, some would abuse it and still want and need. I think it's a great concept. I've tackled this sometimes with the insurance industry as well, that, there should be a level starting point at which you're given enough insurance coverage that should statistically see you healthy for your whole lifespan, rather than waiting. Now, you need to factor that in for some genetic code. Some people are going to draw an unlucky card in the pack and, have cancer run in their genes or whatever it is, and require more than average. And that, you can build that kind of thing in. But then everyone is given the opportunity to do the right thing from the word go. Will they all do that? No, they won't. I mean, this is human nature. But is it a fairer way of dealing with it? Yes, I actually think it is. And I think it's proactive, and I think it's quite creative. And I think it's something that should be at least experimented with. It's a good question. What made you ask that?
Well, this kind of is in the air, and I've been looking into it, and I think it's a fair way to do so because if it seems in my mind inevitable that in the next 5 to 10 years, robots and AI will do most human tasks that are done today. And it's just a matter of time with this progress, other than if AI gets out of hand, then there'd be no us anymore. And it just feels like there needs to be that conversation done. And we're just kind of talking about it earlier than maybe government officials realize it.
Yeah. Yep. We're opening up a whole nother can of worms, which is, the relevance and the effectiveness of government and large government organizations. I mean, we need a whole day on that, but generally they are incredibly inefficient. They may have some very good people, but terribly inefficient systems that are not geared up to changing fast enough or adequately enough. And yeah, I think this will drive down things. I mean, honestly, let's take our Vancouver here, for example, and Ken Sims, who Sim I've worked with, a wonderful guy, great man. He's like he really, whatever other people think of him, I've kind of known him personally, and his heart is absolutely in the right place in terms of wanting to do the right thing for this city, but shackled, frankly, by some antiquated bureaucracy and systems that prevent you from doing the right thing. So those things need to be broken and smashed and done in a different way. Yes, we need some rules, we need some order, of course, but crazy things. We talk about AI, like the time it takes to get an approval for construction or even changing a kitchen or something like that. Now the systems have become so completely corrupted here. There's no reason why it should cost 6 times as much as it does in the province down the road and take 3 times as long. It's sinful, when actually you don't even need a human to do it. A robot could do it. And will we get those systems in place quick enough? No. There is, again, if you read the Dim Sum Strategy book, there's a chapter which I call Killing VII, VIII, which is vested interest in inertia. And when you look back at large public bodies, at many public service industries, the education sector, sometimes the health sector, there's a huge vested interest in having the problem persist, because when you take it away, you lose your job, instead of the excitement of going on to the next challenge. And this was, identified particularly in the charitable and the public health sector. If you are looking to eradicate polio, but your business is selling polio vaccines, you at some point you hit a crossroads where saying, hang on, we're killing our business if this disease goes away. And what about all the charitable organizations we've set up and funded? We've now got, 500 people around the world basically dependent on us to serve this. And I know it sounds petty, but that's exactly what happens. And suddenly there's a realization that, solving this problem puts us out of a job. The vested interest in inertia. Now, it's one of the key things when I am a change agent or an agent for change, is the first thing is to look for where that vested interest in inertia is. And because that's where your rock that you need to work around is going to be.
100%. That kind of gives us a natural question to follow, which is, how do you feel and what will change with the U.S. election now being done and Trump getting to office in about 9 days now?
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Gosh, I saw that on your question list, and I said, is he going to really ask that? So, well, you have. It's great. I mean, I don't want to kind of get into a kind of political debate. I am almost apolitical. And, you find that there are good people on both parties or all parties that represent, good things. And so I'm not, I'm not going to play a Republican, Democrat or whatever kind of divide, liberal, conservative divide. Honestly, it does not change much anything I would do in terms of the philosophy or the approach of building brands. You do need to recognize the changing landscape and dynamics. And I think I think with Trump in particular, when I do a change management exercise, I ask my clients in a workshop to suspend disbelief, which basically means try and shelve where your original coming in thinking or biases are now. Just rest it. Suspend disbelief. don't say no before you've considered yes. And I think there's an element of that with the Trump campaign to come. I think most people would agree that his external skeleton, how he presents himself, his persona, the narcissism, the ego, is a turnoff, for sure. Unbelievable that he can do that some way. So it's not a natural fit. However, not everything that he does or his policies that he implies are bad. In fact, some of them are really good, and he's actually been proven to be quite right about, the imposing threat of China, about, America's overinvestment in protecting and defending the world, which, by the way, was what Britain was playing before World War II, and that transition of power change over after World War II and into America. America's now holding that mantle and saying, why us? And all of us, quite rightly. Are there things which I don't feel instinctively are right at? Global geopolitics is like a jellyfish. It kind of comes in and out. But, I don't like this move towards more protectionism and nationalism and borders and let's look after our own at the expense of looking after a bigger globe. I'm very much more into the global connectedness part of that, and I believe that the shrinking and border protectionism, not to say there are issues. I'm acknowledging issues of immigration and things that need to be dealt with, but in the bigger scheme of things, I believe in a borderless world where there is a shared and equal opportunity to resources, and that because you are born on a piece of land does not mean that you own it, or that you have a necessary right to protect others from accessing resources. But it needs to be done in a fair way. So that part of Trumpism is going to be interesting to see. But he's a deal maker. He's a businessman. It's show me the money. He's a shark. He's not a dolphin. He's or a carp. So he will go out and take what he wants as much as he wants. Do I think he's inherently? Well, I'm not, I shouldn't go there. So yeah.
Yeah, let's just leave it at that.
Yeah.
But very interesting thing about the border thing you brought up, which is just fascinating. I've never looked at it that way, and I will reflect on that.
So you think about different laws and cultures. You can make laws, but you can't enforce them. In the same way, you can put up borders. You can build Trump's wall. You won't keep people out. There's always a way through the wall, or under the wall, or over the wall, or around the wall. Always, ever. The best you can do is create environments that are harmonious and that flourish and that respect, I think, differences. Do I think that there is that people and countries have a right to protect their values? Absolutely. Literally, as I was coming into this podcast interview, I was listening to the radio about this atrocious affair in the UK about, the grooming and raping of young girls by people are being chastised for it by Pakistani groups who are immigrant in there, and people are afraid to even mention country names like this. By the way, I've got fantastic Pakistani friends, and I don't want to wall or blackmail anyone, but that's the truth. That's what's happening, and that's being suppressed. And is it acceptable that in one country, this, misogyny and terrible abuse of women is kind of almost accepted? It's not acceptable if that, contravenes your core values and what's right about society. So no, in that respect, understand what I'm saying about porous borders. You can still respect values and beliefs and protect those. And people should hopefully find and migrate to the places that they're comfortable with and that reflect their beliefs and what empowers them. Yeah.
To do a 180 on the topic, what's your intuition about what qualities a business leader should have?
Above all, he or she needs to be human. And I know again, everyone says sincere and integrity and things like that. Those are cost of entry for my job, but they're actually really, really hard to do. And being part of that is also being vulnerable, and allowing people to help you as a person. I think that takes real courage, and particularly with your younger generation coming in here, and often with women who have to try harder in a man's world still, which is a shame, but it is changing, that you kind of have to assume this dominant leadership position where you've got all the answers to everything, and you're the smartest person in the room and all of that. I think your generation are a little bit better than ours was at recognizing actually you don't have to be that, but it still persists. So I would say that be human, absolutely be sincere, be courageous. Courage is so sorely lacking, and particularly amongst leaders in tough positions who have to make tough choices. You are not going to get everything right either, so you have to learn to be resilient, and as long as you learn from your mistakes, you'll move on and you'll go up. So yeah, those would be mine. It obviously helps if you're successful in achieving your goals, but that also means being accountable and setting out what your goals are before you achieve them. But yeah, no, the best leaders I've worked for have been inspiring people who are humble, who do lead by example. So the great creative directors, they were just wonderful. They would work themselves, and they weren't often the best teachers, and you had to kind of help them learn to be better teachers. But they would inspire through their actions and their work, but in a very humble and a human way, in a giving way. So those, yeah, they're kind, they're generous, and more often than not, they're not driven by money. They're driven by passion.
What's a simple exercise or mindset shift anyone can use to unlock their creativity today?
I mean, yeah, there are so many exercises or thoughts on that. I ask simple questions like, some of your questions you've asked. What would I do differently? If just 3 things I would do differently if I had a chance again would be one element or one thing. I think the other, there's so many other kind of ways in which you can think of, if you really want to be creative or come up with ideas that often actually succeed. What would get me fired tomorrow if I did? I'm not recommending that everybody goes out and practices this, but you might think about it. Those type of exercises push boundaries, break glass, get you out of boxes. And yeah, there's one more that I'm going to contemplate on. It's more, let me come back to my third one.
What motivates you?
I am really motivated by what I call constructive disruption. That is changing things that fundamentally are broken by doing something creative in a completely different and unexpected way. The things that really drive me. If you find that, if you're a protagonist, there has to be an antagonist. What is the thing that drives me, that infuriates me? It's what we were talking about earlier, actually, some of this vested interest and inertia in putting inefficient systems, bureaucracies, blockages to things that should not exist, that astonish me they exist because they're an obstacle to an elegant solution which would help people, whether or not, help them improve their health, their efficiency, their productivity, their happiness, their joyfulness, whatever it is. So that really drives me, and in the bigger scheme of things, and they're quite rare to do those kind of things to really make people wake up and see and do things in a completely different way, but they're really fulfilling when you achieve them. The other way is in a smaller way, which is making just small improvements in people's lives. 1 or 2 things that you might take out of this conversation, a snippet that somebody's going to say, hadn't resonated, hadn't thought about that, but yeah, actually, that I'm going to try that, or I'm going to do that, or I'm going to think differently about this now, and help improve their lives in some way. That sounds a little bit kind of conceited and kind of holier than thou, but yeah, that's the kind of thing that motivates me. Like I said, the most rewarding thing is the surprise compliment of somebody who's just come back and just read your book, or quotes back something that you've written that you know that in fact, and you kind of think, okay, it's made that little ripple, the earth just shook on its axis just for a little 30 seconds. That's good enough for me. That's it. Yeah.
What challenges you?
Dealing with bureaucracy, administration, obfuscation, slow processes, small-mindedness, all of those kind of things, that are obstacles to big change in progress. Now, having said that, I know where my thinking bias is, and I do respect the fact that you need order and procedure and rules and systems to be able to effectively operate in a community or a society and get things done. And I actually really respect it, because that's not my core strength, so I always look to find some complementary skill sets in that area. But those are my challenges. So things like I was doing last night, which was trying to fill in a 9-page fillable PDF format in Adobe that was glitching the whole time, asking questions that were frigging needless, pointless, and taking 3 hours of my life away from me, because, and I know why it's done. It was because the insurance company is trying to collect research data from me, not because, it was asking 7 out of the 9 pages were self-interested, internal research-generated questions. They didn't need more than my address, my legal details, my bank account, and to be able to do what was functioning. So those things infuriate me, because you're trapped into systems with no alternative. It's like, the airline that is absolutely terrible, that you detest, that loses your baggage, is always late, rude service, but it's the only one that's operating from A to B that you need to get to. You don't have a choice. You like it or lump it. I'm much more for breaking that and finding choice and doing something completely different. You asked.
No, these are great. But lastly, what do you think is the meaning of life?
You really do ask little questions, don't you?
I love these questions. Yeah.
Well, everyone knows the answer to that is 42 if you read Douglas Adams, but I'm going to pass that. Well, it's a deep question, and it deserves a deep answer. I don't know whether I'm right, but I had a near-death experience last year, health-related thing to do with my lungs, which, touch wood, fortunately now I'm recovered from, but it was very, very sudden, and it was really touch and go. And you kind of reflect there. I literally had the priest come in and say, in the hour of your death kind of thing in front of you. So it was like, hey, I'm not ready to die yet, but I very nearly could have. And in that time, the things that were important to me were staying alive long enough to see my youngest son have his 21st birthday, have my family around me, let them know how proud I am of all 3 of my sons. They're just fantastic young men. And my wife, of course. And I really fancied a good cup of tea, because the tea in the hospital wasn't great. And an orange. I don't know why an orange. I was just I was like on drips and everything, and hadn't done. It wasn't buy that luxury yacht that you've craved for, go off and, own an island in the Bahamas, buy that second home in Tuscany, own the Ferrari. Yeah, although I'm with you, by the way. I love the cars, and Ferraris are great, and I still love them, but it wasn't material things. And I know that sounds a bit holier than thou. But that's the truth. So you asked about the meaning of a life. The real value, when it comes back down to it, is relationships, and the finding happiness. There's a great study. Again, check out the book, the end chapter of Dim Sum Strategy. The last chapter is all about what is that and where do you find happiness. And the longest running happiness survey boiled it down to that. It's the relationships that you have with people and the joy that you bring others as well as yourself.
Peter, it was fantastic speaking to you.
And thank you so much for having me on. Hopefully that's going to be useful for some of your listeners.
I hope so as well. I'm sure it will be, and I wish you all the best in your adventures.
And you too. Thank you. We're going to stay in touch now. We're connected.
For sure. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.